launching the Spanish version of the report. We've already launched the English version a few months ago, and now we are launching the Spanish version in a version that we have jointly produced between the Caravana and Cajar and the organizations that the different members of the Caravana belong to. And also it's an opportunity to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the first caravan that went to Colombia, which was organized by Caravana Colombiana, an NGO from the UK. And so here we have various delegates from the organizations, the Colombian organizations that we visited. We've got people from Cajar, we've got people from the collective Luis Carlos Perez, we've got the lawyers from Cartagena, Justicia y Dignidad, Cooperación Agencia Nacional Étnica, which is an African Colombian organization, the EJP. These are the organizations that we organized this 7th Caravana with in August of last year. And we've also got the real pleasure today to be presenting the report, which we see as a vital tool of advocacy and also an expression of solidarity with the organizations. We know that the Caravana for lawyers in Colombia who defend human rights and who work with victims and communities in solidarity, with commitment, in brotherhood and sisterhood and accompaniment. It's very, very important to them, the work of the Caravana. Which seeks to ensure guarantees for the possibilities of the legal profession who work in human rights to defend the human rights in Colombia. I'm just going to mention some technical points for translation. Most of us are going to be speaking in Spanish, but there is interpretation to English. So people who need interpretation into English, you will see a globe icon at the bottom of your screen, and there you click on that, and you can choose the language that you want to listen in, either Spanish or in English. The panels, all of us are going to be speaking in Spanish, but there will be interpretation for you. And if you have questions, then you can ask your questions in English as well, and they will be interpreted into Spanish. So we'd just like to welcome oh yes, so what the interpretation team, James and Sandra, are requesting is that we speak slowly, structured, in full phrases. We understand that that can be difficult, but please do what you can to speak as clearly as possible. We also welcome Diana. Unfortunately, the person in charge of the press at Cajar was going to be moderating the event today, but isn't able to because of a family death, an unfortunate death in the family. But I'm going to be moderating the event. My name is Carmen Clavel. So the person who's going to be explaining why we're here for the first session of the event is Dora Lucy Arias, who's a lawyer, human rights defender with a long history representing victims and communities. And she's going to be talking to us about why did we organize the first Caravana in 2008. So she's going to talk about the origins of the Caravana. We're going to talk about why she was one of the people who promoted the possibility or the idea of organizing this first Caravana back in 2008. And currently, both nationally and internationally, she represents female lawyers and journalists who are persecuted as a result of their professional activities. So, Dora Lucy, we're going to give you the chance to speak. Thank you for your time. And if you could tell us now why the first Caravana was organized in 2008 and what you would like to stress about the request that was made. Indeed, several of the people who are with us in the meeting today were part of the first Caravana in 2008. So, Dora Lucy, hello, everybody. Good afternoon to everybody. So, welcome to everybody who is here taking part and to everybody who accompanies. I don't know, can you hear me? Yes. So thank you also to the people who are monitoring the situation in Colombia and and who accompany the possibility us in our attempts to ensure that it is possible to continue as activists. 15 years ago, we we wanted to, well, we want to talk about, in 2008, we were interested in seeing how we could strengthen the accompaniment and solidarity of the work that we do. And we thought that one contribution that could be very important to that would be to request international accompaniment from lawyers for the work that we as lawyers carry out in response to the attacks and the pressures applied to people who work in the professionals who work in the field of human rights. So that was the fundamental reason for us making the request. Here you can see an image of the proposal that we made. This is the text of the request that we made to the British lawyers. We called it the Caravana for the right to freedom to exercise law and defend human rights defense in Colombia. And it was advanced by, in the context of increased levels of threat that human rights defenders were facing in Colombia, the big challenges that human rights defending lawyers faced at the beginning of the 21st century. So we thought at that time that the greatest challenge that we faced was to defend the possibility of female and male lawyers to continue defending human rights in the country, and that the people that they were representing had free access to justice. And we've also, since this time, with secret documents that were have been secret over the years, have shown that the levels of threat were very, very much higher from the state than we thought. The intelligence services, the state intelligence services, were carrying out systematic infiltration and attacks and pressure, applying pressure to human rights defenders, much worse than we thought was the case at the time that we requested the Caravana to begin. The President of the Republic, indeed, the office of the president. This was almost impossible to imagine 15 years ago, but we found that the president himself was behind these attacks and pressures that were applied to the human rights community, human rights lawyers. We are very, very grateful for the fact that we received solidarity from our professional colleagues around the world, from all around the world, who did not hesitate in supporting us, in working with us when we when we made this request for international accompaniment. They have studied the situation, examined the situation, showed their solidarity with us. We had organizations from France, Belgium, Canada, the United Kingdom, who responded to our request for accompaniment in 2008, and they've continued working with us ever since. We have been supported over the years by 62 members of the Caravana came from Europe and the Americas to take part in the first Caravana. The government has changed now, and indeed in 2022, when the latest Caravana visited the country, we had for the first time a progressive government in the country. But the concerns at the lack of respect for the rule of law and protection for human rights defenders continues to be in crisis and under great threat in the country, unfortunately. And the situation of communities and organizations in far-flung parts of the country is very, very serious. But what we have managed to do with the support of the Caravana is to ensure that even in the most distant parts of the country, there is legal representation available to the communities and that local activists are able to carry on working. What the Caravana has done is help us confront the different obstacles that we face as professionals. And then to finish, I'd just like to highlight the voice of human rights defenders like Rosa Jaramillo, who was murdered in the northeast of Colombia earlier this year, and Teresa, who was killed in 2003. Both of these human rights lawyers were attacked as a direct result of their work as lawyers defending human rights. Women like them and many other men and women who have struggled, who have fought in order to defend human rights, have been victims of repression and indeed murder in the country. But thanks to the international solidarity that we have received, we have been able to carry on with our work. And there's no doubt that international solidarity is an expression of the tenderness of the international community. Many thanks, Dora Lucy, for your words and for sharing the history. Because we think that it's important to know or understand where we have come from, and that it's important to recognize the people who have been key, who have been so important to the work that we carry out. And that's why we'd like to go to the other side of the pond, as we call it. We'd like Sarah Chandler to explain from the point of view of British, English lawyers why they joined. Sarah is the a founder of the Caravana. She has taken part in every caravana that has visited Colombia. She's a member of multiple organizations of lawyers around the Europe and the world. She's a part of the committee of the Caravana. She's a tireless human rights defender and lawyer. Welcome, Sarah, and thank you for sharing with us the why you said yes to the request that you received.
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Dora Lucy, and good morning to all of you in Colombia, and good evening to all of you who are joining us in other parts of the world. It's a great honor for me to tell the story of the Caravana and how we started and what we have achieved in the last 15 years. So when Dora Lucy contacted me in 2007, she was the president of Acadeum. Her invitation was to organize a delegation of lawyers. It was a surprise, as we had managed to fundraise for 2 lawyers to travel to Bogota to review 100 cases that were going to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights that year. And so we thought that that was the extent of the support. However, it was a vision of a large delegation of 100 lawyers that inspired us all, even though we thought that a delegation of 10 lawyers was big. 100 was much better, though. So in the end, 72 lawyers traveled to Colombia in August 2008 in the first Caravana. And why? We'd all heard about the dangers of being a human rights defender in Colombia. It's the most dangerous country in the world to work as a lawyer or a lawyer. So we understood the need to focus people's attention in the situation and make it visible to the world. As members of the international legal community, we recognized that we could support our colleagues in Colombia by investigating the human rights situation and the situation of human rights violations in Colombia, and to report on what we'd witnessed. So this was much more than academic research. We could open diplomatic doors to the human rights legal community, so the voices of the legal community in Colombia could be heard. We met with local, regional, and national authorities to ask, why did impunity persist? Why did the state not enable justice to prevail? And why was there no protection for lawyers? And finally, why was there no human rights structure in place? So our hosts were the human rights lawyers collectives in the cities that we visited. And they arranged for us to meet with the Defensores del Pueblo, the ombudsman, to hear the testimonies of victims' families and survivors of state violence, as well as visit prisons. More than anything, we focused on the theme, without lawyers, there is no justice. And we've traveled around Colombia in different teams, visiting Barranquilla, Medellín, Cali, Turbo, Pereira, Eje, Cafetero, Bucaramanga, and Bogotá. The 72 lawyers in the delegation went back to their countries and reported to their bar associations, and they inspired others to become involved in the Caravana. So now there are about 250 individual lawyers getting involved in the delegations. Some of them have been involved in many of them. And so there have been more than 300 lawyers visits over the delegations over these 15 years. The Caravana is not only a network of individual lawyers, but of lawyers' organizations. It's really important to now have this solid network that can reach parliamentarians in the 23 countries of delegation members. We can then tell the world that what we witness in every delegation, and today we launched the latest report of the delegation from last year.
Del primero al último hemos respondido a
So we responded to the call of solidarity and provided support. To conclude, I would like to ask again, why? Why so many lawyers from so many countries offer themselves as volunteers to form part of the Caravana? Why? Because we are worried. We're worried about human rights, of access to justice. We care about access to justice. We care about peace and the rule of law. And why? Because they tell us the Caravana saves lives. We recognize the courage of human rights defenders, particularly the lawyers who fight for justice for the victims of human rights violations. We are members of an international legal community, and we will be by your side as long as you need us. So thank you very much. Thank you, Sara, for your inspiring words, your always inspiring words, and for your tireless years of work supporting Colombia. So as Sara said, there's so many international organizations who have formed part of this effort. And now Gonzalo will tell us about those who participated in the 7th Caravana and all the Colombian organizations, the lawyers and human rights organizations who were interviewed and who participated in the 7th Caravana, because we believe that, yes, these networks and alliances save lives. So yes, so this is why we continue our work. So now I'll pass the floor to Gonzalo Saenz, who is a lawyer, a Caravanista, and part of the Foundation of Spanish Foundation of Lawyers, and is the representative of the International Observatory of Lawyers at Risk. He's going to present the reports, the structure of the report from the 7th Caravana, and also the recommendations to the international community and to the Colombian state. And then afterwards, we will have speeches, presentations from 4 Colombian lawyers who will talk to their experience from the ground. As Dora Lucy said, it's so important to see what they are living through and what their experiences are and hear from them. So I will please, just before we pass over to Gonzalo, when you're not talking, if you're not a panelist, can you please put yourself on mute and also your camera, because this, it's like turn off your camera, sorry. So this supports everybody's full participation. So Gonzalo, now I pass you over. So thank you, Carmen. Thank you in name of the International Observatory for Lawyers at Risk, and for being with us for the 7th Caravana. And I would also like to say thank you for trusting me to present this 7th report and the recommendations that we produced out of the last visit. So let's get into it. So to start, in the Caravana, in the 7th Caravana, we traveled there and spent the first 3 days in Bogota before going to the different regions. So we went to 4 this year, last year. Bucaramanga, Cúcuta, Cali, and Cartagena. So 4 different cities. So there were the 4 different teams that we split into, and so that's how we did the different regional reports that we put together into this wider report. So the report was split into 4 chapters. One about the unequal implementation of the peace agreement. So we see it's a very violent peace. The second chapter talks about the rural part, right, rural Colombia, and also possible solutions to the problems, and also the issues of drug trafficking. And then the third, we talk about attacks on peaceful protesters, particularly in the context of the protest and the general strike. And then finally, we talk in the 4th chapter about threats against lawyers and the threats to the independence of the judiciary and recommendations on that area. So within the report, we have a series of observations that we made that were based on the testimonies, the meetings that we held with lawyers, with different organizations, with families who have been victims of the conflict. So within the observations made, I would like to highlight the persistence of persecution of those who try to implement the peace agreements. And so this includes victims and survivors. So the armed conflict continues. That's something that we can say clearly. And so particularly in in rural areas, the illegal actors have actually increased their presence in many rural areas. And in relation to human rights violations is still very high. There are very concerning issues such as the recruitment of children, increasing violence, particularly in this delegation. We have seen in the area of Cúcuta, in the border areas of Cúcuta with Venezuela, we've seen very high levels of killings of social leaders and human rights defenders. And these people are suffering very high risks, and they do not have any effective or significant security or guarantees of their physical security. So the issue of restitution of land, and the communities are often confined and are subject to forced displacement. So leaders are persecuted highly for denouncing these sorts of situations. So there are the right to dissent. Those who exercise their right to dissent are severely repressed, with the social movements involved in the social explosion, the social mobilization, particularly in Cali, where it all started, when it propagated throughout the rest of the country. Then it was particularly against the young people in the Primera Línea, but it was also against many other people involved in the protests. In relation to the judiciary, they are being threatened too. We have seen that there's a lot of political influence, and you can see that clearly. There's a lack of resources, and members of the judiciary are threatened. And so this prevents effective independence of the judiciary. And so we have also identified that Colombian lawyers have been threatened, particularly in cases when particularly relating to human rights cases, and when they are representing victims of the armed conflict, etc., then they are severely threatened. And so you've got this tension of the human rights defenders and the lawyers and who defend these cases are threatened seriously too. And so there is a lack of protection for lawyers in this case. So this is something that should be considered. So human rights defenders working on their as journalists, and I think then please then lawyers need to be recognized in the same category and given the same protections. So within the report, we have made various specific recommendations to the Colombian state and have made also some calls to action. So the general recommendations are based particularly relating to the observations that we made on the ground, but also based on the final report of the Commission for Truth and also the UN Human Rights High Commissioning Office report relating to the state of lawyers. Some of the main recommendations, as we need to deal with the deficiencies and lack of safety and security, and also faith in the judicial system to put an end to impunity. So this is the only way that we can actually get full efficiency of a rule of law in Colombia. So based on this general recommendation, we also have various specific recommendations that would be, firstly, put an end to the violence and ensure safety of those protecting. So you need to dismantle the action of illegal actors in the country and to disarm or have a key role in the peace process. So there are a series of changes that need to take place in the National Protection Unit. So they need to be able to respond quickly and effectively, but particularly in line with what human rights defenders are saying they need. And they need to be able to they need a full comprehensive rural reform to be able to deal with the territorial conflicts undergoing. So yeah, it's all related to the substitution of illicit crops and the restitution of land. A second specific recommendation would be to protect and have a fair and functioning judiciary. So you need a proper financial resources for this institution for it to be able to be independent. And so there's a huge backlog of cases. And so there's such a bottleneck to be able to get there. So that needs to be dealt with. So you need to stop the harassment and interference in the judicial branch by political actors, and then also protect justice operators to have, to ensure that they are sufficiently protective to be able to make the decisions that they have to make without fear of reprisals. And also to ensure that the special jurisdiction for peace can behave and act as it needs to act. And so made institutional changes to resist the co-option and interference by other branches of the government. And so one of the bodies that we believe needs to have an independent body is the Attorney General's office. And so if there's any more specific recommendations that we should make, something that we've made is one of the is the protection of human rights defenders, lawyers. So we need to recognize the work of lawyers for all their work, but also they need to issue statements that condemn attacks against human rights lawyers. And we have seen that in Colombia, human rights lawyers are attacked day after day. So there's Carlos Maldonado in this year, and Leonardo, who's here, could tell us more stories. And in Cajar, in the most recent cases, with the whole story, the whole history of Cajar is a demonstration of the attacks that they face. And so we need to remove barriers from legals, professionals from working without fear of false accusations, and to have proper protection mechanisms to protect them from attacks and protect them from kidnapping, such as Andrea Torres was subjected to last year. So you need to have impartial investigations to protect them from this. And so when they're accused and then taken to court, then there are no impartial trials. So the investigations made are partial and they do not follow due diligence. And you need that to be able to have an impartial legal system, judicial system. Okay. So I think I've done quite a quick summary. I don't know if it's been too quick about what our general observations during the last Caravana, and then the summary of the recommendations. But to close, I'd say that it's also in the hands of the Colombian state and government that just come in 2 weeks before we went on our visit. And so they're the ones that need to implement the findings that we made, because they're very concerning findings. And the International Caravana of Lawyers will continue to work, and we're here to continue to report and monitoring the situation and making sure that the international community hears everything that's happening, and we'll always be there for the lawyers community in Colombia while they need us.
Thank you very much. Hi, Adi. We can see you on screen now. How are you? How is everybody? A welcome greeting to everybody. Thank you, Gonzalo, for your presentation. So what we want to achieve with this launch, in Spanish, we sometimes said, put honey in the mouth is the expression. We want to encourage you to read the report and use it as a tool for advocacy and accompaniment. And therefore, we're going to pass the word over to our comrades in the regions, the people that we have met, so that they can tell the story of their work and what the Caravana means to them, how the Caravana has served them, has been of use to them in their work. I would also like, before anything else, to recognize or express a recognition. I don't know if you can see the slide here. Can you tell me? Yes. In the report, at the end of the report, there's a list of all of the people who, names of the people who have been key to the work of the Caravana and the report. So we'd like to thank once again, reiterate our gratitude to the Colombian organizations, these Colombian organizations that made it possible to gather witness statements and produce the report that we now have in our hands. I'd like to recognize all of the work that you do. And we'd also like to recognize the members of the caravan, these 18 people who took part, those of us who took part in the Caravana last year. And also in particular, I'd like to represent or thank Heather Nunn, who has been the key writer, the principal writer of this report, and who is also present in this event. And also Bout, who's here as well, Gonzalo, Sarah, Carme, Catherine Evans, myself, who have been co-authors under the coordination of Heather. And also I'd like to thank the other people who have contributed, Maria von der Scherp, Agueda Tejada, Alice Garside, and the other people who are mentioned down there, and the revision of the text that was the copy editing that was provided by Jeffrey Forrest. So all of the work that we produced, all of the contents of the report were always checked with the people, with the Colombians who we worked with during and therefore after the event as well. Without saying more at this stage, I'd like to invite Leonardo Jaimes to speak now from the legal team of Bucaramanga, so that he can give us his vision from the region of Bucaramanga. Leonardo is a lawyer. He's a defender of political prisoners and victims of crimes of the state. He teaches at the Industrial University of Santander. Have I said it correctly, Leonardo? Yes. Very good. So thank you very much, Leonardo, for your time. And if you could speak now, thank you, Carmen. So for us, as human rights defenders in the northeast of Colombia, it's very important. The work of the Caravana over the last 15 years has been very important. I have to say that I'm speaking in representation of or from a region that is in the northeast of Colombia, shares a frontier with Venezuela. We're very close to the region of the two rivers and very close to Bolivar, where there is a major advance or where the paramilitary groups are very, very strong currently. We're also close to Cesar, the south of the Cesar department, where private armies also operate, the private armies of the so-called new paramilitary groups that have been and that represent the interests of the far right. And we're also close to Arauca to the east, over on the east of the mountains. So this is a very complex situation that we inhabit. And so the work of the Caravana goes beyond simple solidarity that is fashionable, let's say, with Latin America. We don't see the work of the Caravana as just an act of solidarity, but we see it as an act of direct solidarity against the genocide and the human rights crisis in Colombia. Over the years, the Caravana, and in the report that we have read, not only its conclusions, but also its content, we think that it helps to understand the why of the matter. Why do we need a Caravana in 2022? And the answer to that is a very simple answer. It's because the problems or the processes of extermination, of attack, of symbolic murder of sectors and groups and organizations that are counter-hegemonic in the work that they carry out are under systematic attack. That is why the work of the Caravana remains important. Since 2022, the Caravana, well, in 2022, the Caravana arrived at a moment of hope. It was 2 weeks after a new government had taken power, and there were a great deal of expectations about what the new government might be able to achieve, especially after 4 years of the government of Ivan Duque, that had placed obstacles in the way of the peace process, and that had sowed that had lied, really, that had manipulated the situation to the Colombian people. So once again, why a Caravana? Why try and raise the profile of the situation in Colombia? Why raise the profile of lawyers and peasant communities across Colombia? And what I want to, in order to answer that, I want to say that we, as a part of our organization, we have been victims. We, as lawyers and as community organizations, we've been victims, even though it's difficult to use the word victim. We ourselves have been victims of the Colombian state. We have been stigmatized for the work that we do, that we carry out. And I'd just like to talk very briefly about the year.
Si bien estamos ante un nuevo gobierno, un gobierno de cambio, algunos llaman, otros gobierno progresista, lamentablemente debemos informar que el modelo represivo continúa igual. Y eso nos permite entonces nosotros sacar una conclusión que no es un tema absolutamente que ha existido en Colombia políticas represivas que están más allá de las decisiones o la voluntad de un gobierno que está muy bien, que ojalá intente cambiarlo, pero que está tan incrustado en políticas de Estado. Y voy a mencionar algunas de ellas de manera rápida. El paramilitarismo en este momento efectivamente se ha reconfigurado y hoy toma formas de refinamiento y que se está mostrando de manera fuerte y se está extendiendo. Por otro lado, la militarización en los territorios, con un perverso narrativa de que se quiere mostrar ahora como una cara nueva, pero es una vieja institución en medio de una institución señalada de graves violaciones a los derechos humanos. Por otro lado, la inteligencia en Colombia, a partir de ubicar y la construcción de enemigos hacia defensores, defensoras, organizaciones de derechos humanos, la impunidad de crímenes de Estado nos preocupa profundamente porque continúa. La JEP, pues citando al padre Javier Giraldo, defensor de derechos humanos, ha sido una frustración para las víctimas de crímenes de Estado. Y por otro lado, nos preocupa la nueva narrativa que a partir de la Comisión de la Verdad se impone en Colombia como un relato único, bajo la tesis de que todas las víctimas son del conflicto armado, cuando el conflicto armado es un pretexto y lo que ha ocurrido en Colombia realmente es un proceso genocida. Creemos y consideramos importante que la situación de los jóvenes que están siendo judicializados, sus defensoras y defensoras en el marco del estallido social continúa y no existe en este momento alternativas para ellos. Y vemos con preocupación, tal como se planteó en el informe, la cárcel como un mecanismo, un dispositivo genocida, pero también como un instrumento de control social, se sigue manteniendo y sigue siendo vigente. Nosotros traemos como conclusión que la situación de la estigmatización y el señalamiento hacia...
I'm so sorry, I've been on mute all the way through that. Saying that despite a progressive government over the last years, the forces that are ranged against the progressive forces and human rights defenders in Colombia are more powerful than the state itself. That there is the creation of an internal enemy, which are the forces, the progressive forces, and it is the structures of this national security state that is continuing to act against the interests of the human rights community and the population. They have been acting systematically and consciously against the terms of the peace agreement, trying to weaken and weaken the agreement of the peace agreement that has been that resulted from the negotiation with the FARC. So I'm going to finish just by saying I hope that it would be wonderful if the Caravana didn't exist, if it didn't have to exist. But while it is needed, we're very, very pleased that it does. So we, even though we have a progressive government that is in power, we still have a need for the international solidarity of organizations like the Caravana. It's very important that the international community continues to look out for us. A warm greeting to the communities, to the trade unionists of the Northeast, to the political prisoners who we represent, to all of the people whose testimonies form such an important part of this report. So Thank you very much, Carmi. Thank you very much, Ursula. And we will continue working with you, struggling in order to raise the profile of the situation that we face and to continue to defend human rights, speaking not only for our comrades across Latin America, but internationally as well, and express great gratitude for all of the work that you have done. And we will be very keen to see the purpose that this very important report is put to. Gonzalo, Leonardo, thank you very much for your words, for your continued commitment, and it's always a pleasure to listen to you. I'd just like to continue just a reminder to people who have joined us lately. We are recording this event. We're recording the English and the Spanish version, and both versions are going to be available available to you after this event. And we've also got the reports written both in English and in Spanish, which you will be able to read in the afterwards. People who are not speaking, once again, a reminder, if you could put yourselves in mute, if you could turn your cameras off as well. We have a person participating whose name is not presented. If you could tell us who you are so that we make sure that everybody knows who we are. So I'd like to pass on now to Julia Adriana Figueroa Cortes, who is a lawyer and a human rights defender and a teacher in the university, and who has been a human rights defender for more than 17 years. She is the representative of macro case number 3 in the jurisdiction especial, the transitional justice process. So Julia, thank you very much from CECALP in Bucaramanga. When you've got 2 minutes left, I'm going to tell you when you've only got 2 minutes left, okay? Thank you, Carmi. So first of all, I'd like to congratulate you on the production of this report. I like the structure, it's very complete. We are today celebrating the launch of the report from the Caravana, but I also wanted to thank Cahar as well, whose work in solidarity with us and in organizing the Caravana and the possibility of producing the report has been so important. Today, many organizations, many of us we work in close alliance with them, but we also recognize the very important role, the protective role that they contribute to the human rights community. I also want to highlight the fact that the report supports very much, provides backing to what we as organizations say, and that it means that it gives us, strengthens us in our ability to take part in and lead the human rights work, the work of human rights defense in the country. And I'd like to thank you for the fact that the report goes into so much detail, because it's a really important expression of the circumstances of the situation that we face. It's an expression of the continued solidarity that you have shown us and of your ongoing commitment to Colombia. Because we believe in the work of the Caravana, of the international solidarity work that you carry out. It means the work of the Caravana means that estás en mudo.
Estás en mudo, Julia. Ahora.
Hablaba del agradecimiento.
So I was talking about the gratitude that we want to express to the Caravana, not only from us, but also from other social organizations and community organizations who also recognize the importance of the report for their own ability to carry on, do their work. The Universidad Libre, ASONAL, the trade union of legal operators. It is the work of the Caravana that means that it's possible for us to continue working. This means that the contribution of the Caravana goes beyond the work of the Caravana, if you understand what I mean. When I read the report, we all read it. When we were reading the testimonies, it made us feel that their voices were present in the report. And I just want to applaud the effort that you have made in order to visualize, to make visible the voices of all of the testimonies. On a day-to-day basis, the situation remains the same, really. The same circumstances that we denounced a year ago are still continuing. Despite everything that the government has done to try to respond to the needs of the communities, this support has not arrived. And this is the similar could be said about the decisions or the judgments of the legal profession as well. We're not seeing decisions and judgments that are the ones that we need. Indeed, decisions are being made that delegitimize the work of the legal operators, of judicial operators, and of lawyers. It's as if the contribution that we as lawyers can make is being ignored, and it's important that our work as lawyers is taken into account, is not ignored, given the situation that we're facing. So with the fact that it's difficult to talk about a peace process, take seriously about a peace process when the rights of the population, when the rights of legal operators, judicial operators are not respected either. Can you hear? It's just explaining that she's dropped off the call, I think. Yeah, she's gone. She's dropped off the call. Yes, it looks like the internet has gone, that she's lost her connection. So maybe we wait a little bit to see if she comes back. Otherwise, maybe we can leave it there and we can pass on to somebody else. And when she gets her connection back, maybe we could reconnect with her. So I take advantage to say to you again that if you do have any comments, please, or questions, if you put them in the chat, if you can write them in the chat, then please do that, and we will make sure that they get asked. We've got someone from the SECALP as well. Andrea, I think. I don't know if maybe Andrea is there. Andrea, I can see you. Andrea, do you know if we've had a problem with Julia? Yeah, she's lost from the call. We're just reconnecting. So let's wait for her, shall we? I can continue until she reconnects, I think, maybe. So while we're waiting for Julia, will invite oh, hold on. Sorry. So we are we're asking Fasol to speak. So Carlos Ojeda, lawyer and director of Fasol. Maybe while we're waiting for Julia to return to the call, we'll listen to Carlos, who is in Bogota in the offices of Cajar, and is sitting next to Reynaldo, who will speak next. So Carlos, when you're ready.
Está en mudo.
No te había conectado.
Ahora.
Gracias, buenas tardes.
Okay, good afternoon. Good evening to everybody who is in Europe and else in the world. So thank you for giving us this space to talk today. And yes, of course, we're celebrating the 15th year of the Colombian Caravana. And so it's been very, very clear about the main difficulties that we suffer in being able to exercise the law and protect human rights in Colombia. So FASOL has been working for the last 32 years to protect and to support victims of the state. So firstly, we'd like to thank you for the report by the Caravana from the 7th Caravana, and the way that it highlights the risks and the difficulties, particularly the pressure and the threats that judicial operators face. So these risks are very well set out in the report, and unfortunately they have increased in many regions of the country. I share with what Reynaldo is saying. So that there's a huge lack of support in the different territories. And the government's policy for total peace isn't working. We need this to provide the guarantees that lawyers and human rights defenders need to be able to protect their clients in territories. So there have been more than 50 cases in 2022 and 23. People have been threatened, killed, kidnapped. There's been other different sorts of persecution of lawyers, and also internal prosecution of prosecutors. And the criminalization of and the obstruction of justice in some of the regions. So the population is not only put risks because of this, but there is no justice. And in the second, some lawyers face criminal trials and in the many areas of the country where the conflict persists, they really need justice, and it's lacking. So justice, people need to have access to justice. And in places like San Juan in the Chocó and Antioquia have seen increases in attacks against judicial operators in these regions. So judges and prosecutors in these areas are often lacking any support because they're the only, and there are some regions that have absolutely no presence of a judicial of access to justice. So in one of the recommendations made by the sorry. So I will give you a summary. So in the territorial situation, so justice operators are facing many threats in the different territories. And when the government tries to build total peace, what's actually happened, we're having increased threats against lawyers. So there have been 50 cases in 2022, and as far as we got in 2023. So we would like to take up the recommendations made by the Caravana to be able to push the Strait to take action in this regard and take action on the recommendations made on various points in the peace process. So they are not, the implementation isn't responding to the needs of the victims, and we think that's very important to highlight various situations that are happening in the country. Whereas various rulings of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace have not been recognized. When paramilitary groups have attacked the Colombian population. And so this needs to be rectified. So also talking about the mass forced disappearances that was undertaken, and we've found there are many common patterns. But this needs to be, the truth needs to be explicitly explained and then dealt with. So we talk about the recommendation about the functioning of the judiciary and the risks that the Special Jurisdiction for Peace faces. So there have been magistrates or high judges who have been threatened, and relating to the North Antioqueño region. But yeah, the actions of those who try to exact justice are likely to be threatened for further because there aren't these guarantees in place. So I would add recommend a risk to this report. So the Commission for the Clarification of Truth talked about the fulfillment of the recommendations, but it's important to talk about a specific recommendation about justice, in which you need to recognize the structural violence perpetrated against judicial operators in this country. And this is very under-recorded. There have been more than 1,000 attacks against judicial operators. And the Commission of Truth talked about how this violence was systematically affected against judicial operators. And all of this has been left in complete impunity. So when any active investigation or trials that involves political actors, the military forces or armed groups, lead to just a left in impunity because of violence that is affected against the judicial operators moving forward with the cases. And we need to recognize that there is this systematic violence against victims and against the people who represent them. And finally, besides protection that judicial operators and lawyers need, I would also make a call, two calls, with the mechanisms for protection. We would also need to call on the Colombian state to prevent the violence in the first place, and call to defend the judicial branch as a fundamental right for citizens to have access to justice, and for them to have an independent judiciary, a strengthened judiciary, and a protected judiciary. In a country that unfortunately still in many regions is suffering a serious conflict. So it is so important to understand that behind this, there are lots of violent dynamics that affect also threaten the physical integrity of the people within the judiciary. And it's not just judges, but it affects all of us as citizens. It affects all of us as citizens, as humans, men, women, children, and to also alert that there are people who are stopping the investigations when they are started to investigate these acts of violence and violations of human rights. So thank you. Thank you, Carlos Ojeda. And now we will pass back to Julia so she can finish her intervention. So thank you. I'll give you the floor now. And thank you, Carlos, for your last words. The importance of prevention. And I think that's something that is so important to take away. So thank you. Sorry, my connection failed, but I wanted to talk about what's happening with the peace agreements. But if we analyze the risks and the threats in the context of the peace agreements and what's been happening recently. And so in 2023, when we visited Cúcuta, there's 225 people that have been killed by the SMAD. We've seen new models of violence. They're the powers are reconfiguring in unexpected ways sometimes. So some of the victims are actually being imprisoned. So in a moment of calm, not a moment of calm, because so an idea of peace is getting further and further away all of the time. I want to link this to the lack of power that the government has in the region. Because what we've seen in recent times, so, yeah, when they say that there will be civil servants, there will be people working there, they don't appear. We have we're talking about how important peace is, but all of the killings continue. So, but how can we implement the peace agreement? People don't understand the judicial decisions made, or they're misinterpreted. So peasants' organizations are being persecuted like never before. So this generates this makes us think in other times in Colombia. So what happened in August is we need to try to. So we need to we need to start planning the next Caravana for 2024, because this is what we've had. If we look at the figures from the beginning of 2023, with such shocking numbers of violence and killings, disappearances, we can just imagine what's to come. There's many challenges. So the challenges for the gender violence is an enormous problem. But, so we've moved forward that with some conclusions for the macro case 3. But there are so many weaknesses, but there are some positive points in that respect. But the issue of implementation. We have so many challenges, like how to persuade the government to apply the public policy. And so it's like the government doesn't even come to visit us. But so we want to continue. We're human rights defenders. We must continue to denounce the attacks and the situations here. We must protect and try to support institutions and continue to reiterate the importance of protecting the judiciary and its independence. And the reports that come out of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, they're important things to support us, our work on. And talking in universities, because all of this work is something we can just keep working on that. So thank you. Thank you for everybody here for the work that you're doing and for coming to learn about the realities of lawyers collectives in Colombia. And I think now more than ever, whilst we've got these like glimpses of hope, there are so many dark places, and so we really need you now. Thank you. Thank you, Julia, for your words. And yes, thank you for your request and the explanation that you're going to continue to disseminate the report and the recommendations throughout the territory, because the report is just the beginning. It is a tool for advocacy and for solidarity and accompaniment. And Aguila will talk a little bit more about that now, but now I will pass over to Reinaldo Villaga Albas, a lawyer from Cajar and the vice president of the FIDH. Thank you, Reinaldo. I'll pass you the floor. And thank you to Cajar for having organized this, the launch of the report together with us. So when you are ready, Reinaldo.
Thank you, Carmi. First of all, I'd like to talk a bit about recognize the 15 years of work of the Caravana and say that this has been 15 years of accompaniment with an unparalleled act of solidarity. These caravanas that have been organized, 7 now, with the one in 2022, have contributed to saving lives, have helped to prevent the criminalization of defenders, and have helped people to feel more accompanied by international solidarity. So we'd like to thank everybody who has participated in these caravanas, and especially, of course, to the 18 lawyers who visited Colombia in the caravana that was last year. As has already been said in this event, this report is going to be a very important tool for us. It will help us carry out our advocacy work with the Colombian authorities, but also beyond. The 2022 Caravana occurred in a very particular context. in which the judicial independence was particularly threatened. For instance, the direct intervention by the then President Ivan Duque, who attacked the various judicial decisions that had been handed down. His position attacked the democratic principle. He attacked the special jurisdiction for peace. He attacked judgments handed down by the Supreme Court that had ordered the detention of the former president Álvaro Uribe Vélez. The president himself attacked judgments of these high courts. This is the context in which the Caravana visited. Also, the work of the Fiscal General, the public prosecutor, continues to intervene politically in the functioning of the justice system, as he was then a political ally of Duque. And he has gone against his constitutional, they've gone against their constitutional duty to maintain the independence of the judiciary. And they have contributed, therefore, to crimes against humanity, to impunity for crimes against humanity. And then the same public prosecutor who will finish their role in February 2024 has continued to act in ways that go against their constitutional duties, pursuing pursuing members of their own institution, has been attacking members of the public prosecutor's office, has continued to attack the positions of the current government, the Petro government, to sabotage proposals and policies of the current government because they don't agree with the views of the government. They have been actively sabotaging the government's policies. However, in terms of the independence of the judiciary, it remains, despite these problems, or as well as these difficulties, to exercise as a lawyer is very, very difficult. Remains very, very, very difficult. In Colombia, we've recently had a regional forum, the Latin American regional event on the independence of the judiciary. We've organized this event precisely because we're so concerned about the threats to judicial independence. People who have been lawyers who are being detained, who are being arrested, who are being placed under house arrest just because they're carrying out their activities as lawyers. In the case of CAJAR, the Colectivo de Abogados, in less than a week, the last week, attacks have been advanced, threats have been advanced towards one of our lawyers who works in a town outside Bogota. This was just last week. So our concerns remain about the attacks, about the pressures that are being applied to our friends and our colleagues. And so therefore, the victims of the abuses, with the difficulty of achieving representation for them, continue to suffer from high levels of impunity that characterize cases of human rights violations across the country, where it's difficult or almost impossible to pursue the most responsible, the high-ranking officials who are responsible for the abuses. The public prosecuting authorities have no interest in pursuing them. There should be the institutions should be supporting the special jurisdiction for peace, but it's in fact in their attempts to pursue those most responsible for abuses, but in fact is doing the opposite, is sabotaging the activities of the HEP of the special jurisdiction. There have been in terms of the false positives, so-called false positives, judicial executions that were carried out under the previous two governments. There's been no interest by the prosecuting authorities to pursue these cases seriously either. When we advance demands or advance the cases against in relation to these extrajudicial executions, what we hope for is that those most responsible for these forced illegal murders of civilians, when we try to pursue those most responsible and get justice in these cases, there is no interest on the part of the prosecuting authorities to pursue these cases. And so we're also very concerned about the decision made by the International Criminal Court to close the case, the preliminary examination of the case of Colombia, which is absurd in these cases, in the circumstances in which we are living, when so many leaders and so many social leaders and so many lawyers have been attacked. The idea that they should close this preliminary examination is absolutely absurd given the current circumstances. It's quite clear that there is ample reason to continue the preliminary investigation. The HEP, the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, was created in order to look at the questions of violations, serious crimes and crimes against humanity committed within the context of the armed conflict. But many of the cases that should be heard by the Special Jurisdiction have not been passed over to it. The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court said, well, look, the HEP, the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, is operating very well. That was his justification, their justification for closing the preliminary investigation. But this ignores completely the pressures that are being applied to the HEP and the fact that so many cases that should have been passed to it are still being heard by the ordinary justice system in Colombia, even though this is not what the transitional justice system says that they should be doing. So, given this panorama, I have to say that we still feel really emotional about the fact that we continue to benefit from this international solidarity, of which the Caravana report is one of the expressions. And it's very good to hear that you're going to continue working with us and to show your active solidarity with us. So we'd like to thank you for the Caravana and the lawyers who work from within their own institutions to continue to provide solidarity to Colombia. So thank you so much. Thank you very much, Reynaldo. And thank you to Leonardo, Julia, Carlos, and Reynaldo for for responding to the time pressures that we've imposed on you. We don't like to deny time to our speakers, but we sometimes have to do it. We've now got 15 minutes for questions, for plenary discussion. And if we have no questions or we have no discussion, then I will give you more time. I haven't seen questions appearing in the chat. I don't know if somebody would like to make a comment, but the idea is that they should be brief comments, brief questions, so that the greatest number of people possible can take part. We'll group the questions that are asked. I don't see any hands raised. I don't see anybody writing in the chat with questions that they'd like to ask. No, I don't see anyone. So maybe I would like to offer, maybe we could organize a little, if we just ask each of the panel members if they'd like to say some final words, just to produce some final conclude some final words on what they have said. There was a comment from somebody saying thank you very much for the observations. Gonzalo, thanking Gonzalo for the presentation of Gonzalo from the Observatorio. I don't see the observatory. I don't see any other people who are asking to. So maybe we could have a round of final comments from each of the the panel members, or I could say some of the things that have interested me in particular from what you've said, the terms of prevention, of judicial independence, emphasizing the final words of Ronaldo, who's saying that the prosecuting system doesn't, that the criminal justice system doesn't operate properly. That's why we need the International Criminal Court. What Julia was saying, that threats against human rights defending lawyers continue. And then also what Leonardo said about the reconfirmation, the reconfiguration of paramilitary organizations, that in Colombia is still living through a conflict, despite the fact that there are peace accords that are being implemented, despite the fact that the conflict continues. So I don't know if you'd like to make some final comments that maybe you could enter, that you could. Oh well, we got Ivana now would like to say something. And if you can present yourself as well, say who you are first, please, Ivana. And then we'll go to final words. Oh, Ivana is my daughter. Welcome to. How are you, members of the Caravana? Can you hear me? Yes, we can. So you've described a very complex panorama in terms of guarantees to access to justice. But first of all, I'd like to just give a welcome to all of the members of the Caravana and all the people who work for human rights here in Colombia. The panorama that has been presented is very complex, and it could make it difficult. Or in our case, for instance, where we've been very close to the government, those of us who have been close to the government, it could be difficult for us to be critical of a government which has so many people in it with whom we have worked over the years. So I think that maybe the threat is that would lead us to self-censor ourselves because of the fact that we have been close with them in the past. I think that in terms of transitional justice processes, I think that, like the special jurisdiction for peace, I think that it's been difficult in the current situation, but it is advancing, it is making progress. But despite that, there is a continuation and a reconfiguration and consolidation of self-defense groups, that's code for paramilitary groups, across the whole of the national territory. A couple of years ago, the warning was advanced that we were told that there were some 100 that they were in 100 municipalities across the country. But I think now it would be difficult to say that there are any municipalities, any towns across the whole country where there isn't a paramilitary presence. So the question would be, how can we ensure or guarantee the implementation of the mechanisms for reparation, or the search for truth and justice and reparation, if we've got such a level of consolidation and reconfiguration of the paramilitary organizations across the country? If there's, what we're also seeing is the co-optation of social leaders by the paramilitaries. This didn't used to happen, but now we're seeing community leaders who are being co-opted by the paramilitaries, and there's kind of a pact of silence. If there've been problems of acts of violence or displacement of populations, then there's now a kind of a pact of silence. No one's speaking out against what is happening to the community leaders in the communities. And this pact of silence means that it's much more difficult to ensure participation of the population of society. And I'd like to express our concern about the current government. About a month and a half ago, as a result of my work in relation to the Canal del Dique in the Cartagena region, to try and ensure that which did lead to suspension of the project that we have been seeking to get suspended. This led to the public statements made by a public official against me, who characterized me as a criminal as a result of the work that I had been carrying out to get the Canal del Dique project suspended. And this obviously leads to serious levels of threat against me. And this kind of statement from public servants, public officials, does tend to silence the voice of people who oppose or who speak out about situations. And so this, as we've said, in the Isla de Cobado, in the area of the Canal del Dique, we spoke out about these over 5,000 hectares that are now in the hands of people who are associated with the paramilitary organizations. And that we have received threats as a result of the work that we're carrying out against these projects. The fact that public officials speak out against us puts our lives at risk. So I'm saying that it's not so much that these are voices that come from the highest levels of the government, but there has been a change in the jurisprudence, turning to the legal system. There's been a change in the jurisprudence about the rights of victims. All of the judgments that have been handed down by the high courts in favor of the victims, this has been reversed by lower courts, and this means that many of the victims of human rights in the circuit, on the legal circuit of the Caribbean court, is ignoring decisions that have been made of the Inter-American Court and the Inter-American Commission. We've got local courts that are ignoring legal precedents to jurisprudence of international, including of international court system. Amaya said to us just at the beginning of last month, he said that we don't have enormous massacres like used to occur, but 2-3 people are being killed each month. Jose Amaya said this, that we don't have the high levels of victims in massacres, but we've got a drip by drip killings, which are worse than was the situation that took place, that occurred 20 years ago. This is how to describe the situation in the Caribbean coastal region. So thank you for letting me speak. Thank you, Adil, for your words. It's very important also that you have provided us with this panorama of the situation in the Caribbean coast. So I will give 2 minutes to each of the panel members of the speakers so that they can sum up what it is that they've said and how they think that they will be able to continue within this context that we have been describing, that they've been describing. Always, I hope, in a context of hope that you have expressed. Oh, we've got a comment now. I just wanted to, from Alice Garside, who said, good afternoon. In terms of the cases that you are responsible for, the situations that you face as human rights defenders, what spaces exist within which you can act or carry out advocacy? In what ways has the Caravana been effective, would you say? And then we've got a comment from this former member of the public prosecuting services that I'd like to give thanks to the Caravana de Juristas. Please be aware of the things that have been said from this country, who have said that there won't be peace until we have social justice, that it's urgent that public policy should be implemented, and that while there is no guarantee for right to access to the administration of justice, there will never be true justice in the country. Please take that into account as well. So I'd like to support what Carlos has said from FASOL. So having said that, 2 minutes each. And so, as I said, we're going to start with Reynaldo, then Carlos, then Julia, and then Leonardo. If you'd like to start whenever you'd like, Reynaldo, please.
So I would just like to reiterate the importance of the International Caravan of Lawyers for Justice, for the exercise of lawyers in the country. I would also make a call to maintain your work here. I think it's very important to continue to communicate with all the lawyers in the country. and to continue to collate and gather all the information of people of affected and the ways that justice are being affected. Of the lawyers who act to defend human rights in our work, and particularly in relation to victims and their rights. So that would be a call for this work to continue. And we can send the information for the next Caravana so you can prepare your trip. And to keep up the efforts, because these caravanas really support us, and getting our voices out to the international community is really helpful. And also, we need a better reform of the way the justice system works in Colombia. And there's two keys in that. So the way that the Attorney General is elected needs to change. So we have seen in recent years that this is just a piece in a political puzzle. And they are used to not as a political tool, and they're not used to, so that needs to be changed. So thank you very much. So thank you, Reynaldo. Carlos Ojeda, when you want, say thank you. So, and I have some proposals. So from the regional observatories in the territories, in 23 different territories, there's more than 150 people interviewed in the different judicial offices have helped us to collect this information and see the dynamics of risks that judicial operators are subjected to. So I'd make a call to say that prevention cannot only be enacted by security mechanisms. So judges in small municipalities need to be better supported. I would also call attention to the importance of the sufficient resources being dedicated to the judiciary for them to be able to maintain their independence. So sometimes then they have nowhere real to operate from. We just have single people without any real resources to be able to act, or they might be working from police offices, and so this limits their independence. And so you need, so like all of these things contribute to a very sick judiciary. So there's so much pressure on them from different sides. And this is why they suffer from so many psychosocial problems as well, because of the pressures that they are under. And so and also the issue of issuing early alerts, ensuring that people have the right technology to be able to issue these alerts from any part of the country quickly and effectively. And so these would be various ways of mitigating the risk dynamics that everybody suffers in the territories. Thank you very much for your words, Julia. So firstly, say thank you. It's wonderful to be able to say hi and see you all here today. So we are in territories that are completely co-opted by illegal economies, by armed groups. And we have to continue to demand rights be respected. And we are trying to develop strategies not only through the suggested by the Caravana, but other organizations that provide different sorts of protections and lawyers. So we need to continue with all of these actions to contribute in different ways to our protection and to the protection of rights. So the positive is that you can also speak to, to see all the different people who are at risk. So the prosecutors as well that are at risk, and the lack of institutionality in our territories. And so, but you and your visits have helped information to get out. And this has helped us to create a lot of trust, because this information otherwise doesn't get out, and it needs to get out. Other people need to hear about what's happening. And so this has helped even within the country for news of what's happening to get out to different parts of the institutions in other parts of the country, because we don't have that institutionality here. It was, so when you went to speak to the ombudsman, the Defensoría del Pueblo, that helped information get out that otherwise would not have got out. And you, what you do with your visit is to create a further support for us, and actually helps us to communicate with institutions that don't operate in our part of the country. So we'll see what happens now and in the near future with everything that's happening. I think that the pronouncements that the Caravana could make from now on will continue to support the work that we do. And yeah, they're always needed to be able to talk about the human rights situation is always necessary. And so because this has been a really important strategy to protect our lives, our families' lives. So I just want to say thank you once again for having helped us as a collective, but each one of you have implemented your own strategy, and we will continue to analyze the work that you've done to be able to analyze the work that we do in Colombia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. And it's very important what you stressed, that last year we were 18 Caravan members who went, but that there were many organizations also linked with, associated with these members of the Caravana. And that means that it amplifies the work that the Caravana can do. Leonardo, thank you. Well, it's my job to provide the final words. I don't know if I'm going to be capable of doing it, but I will try. I've got a few ideas, 4 or 5 ideas. First, I would like to focus on, or to say that, to emphasize that if paramilitarism isn't dismantled in Colombia, then it won't be possible to resolve the situation. We will continue speaking about the grave situation of human rights. Paramilitarism is a tool, a genocidal tool that is used by powerful sectors in the country to advance its ends. It's also deeply embedded in the culture. Second, from the northeast, where we are involved in peasant struggles, what we need to do, what we're doing, what we're involved in is in the institutionalization of the struggle for human rights. We're seeking to consolidate the struggle for human rights. And what we're seeing now, what we need to see is that people who've been formed, trained in this field is transferred to the state and starts working with the state. But unfortunately, our state is a murderous state, and it's not easy for people who've been trained in the field of human rights and active in the field of human rights to work within the state. Third, we are seen as part of the we're recognized as part of the intelligentsia. We need to look at what happened under the Allende government in Chile and see what happened to the people who are identified as the elite, as the intelligentsia. The UNP, the ONP, the plan, the ONP, I can't remember what organization that means, postured as if it were a democratic organization, but actually it's a front organization of the Democratic Central Party, which is the right wing, the party of the right wing. So we mustn't be hoodwinked by false organizations. Fourth, we have been victims under Petro and under Uribe Vélez of systematic actions of intelligence by the intelligence authorities against the human rights community, creating a situation, if they're allowed to continue working in that way, if the intelligence organizations are allowed to continue working in that way, what they're going to do is to create chaos under the Petro and government. And then finally, unless the way that the special jurisdiction for peace is operating is to be a machinery to ensure impunity in the country. If the HEP doesn't work properly, isn't reformed radically in order to ensure that there is true transitional justice, then what we're going to be living in is a country that is characterized by systematic impunity. So it is because it is not operating in a way that means that the ordinary justice system is guaranteeing the justice for victims of human rights. So what the Caravana needs to do is to continue to provide support for the popular movement, to support lawyers who work to advance the interests of community organizations and grassroots organizations. That is the work that the Caravana needs to continue to carry out in the future, to support committed human rights activists who work in the interests of grassroots organizations. There's no doubt that the Caravana accompanies, that's true, but what the Caravana accompanies is the energy that you represent. What I'm hearing from you is a commitment that you have with the people that you work with. And I want to reiterate the commitment that we have with you who work with such commitment for the communities that you work with. This is what solidarity means. And as someone said earlier on, as Dora said earlier on, solidarity is the tenderness of the relationship of the international community of the people. So we're a little bit run over time, but I want to invite Agüeda Teja, who is a member of the Caravana in 2022, to finalize. She's also a member of the Observatory of Lawyers at Risk. And so when you would like to, Agüeda, please, if you'd like to talk. Well, first, thank you very much. So I'm going to try to be very brief. So this is the moment really to say what the next steps are that we're going to carry out as the Caravana. So the report is now available in English and Spanish. So first of all, we are going to reiterate the call that the comrades who have spoken have made to disseminate the report as widely as you can to ensure that it is as impactful as it can be. Let it be give it to all of the organizations that you work with so that it is presented, it appears on their web pages and is disseminated as widely as possible. As Julia has said and as others have said, use it as an advocacy tool. use the content of the report to advance your advocacy activities, to try to ensure independence of the judicial system and to support the continued human rights defense of human rights from the legal profession. And as Reynaldo and Carlos have said, use it also. It's important that we try to ensure that we continue working between visits, that the Caravana isn't just about the visits, but that we work more fluidly together in order to continue working with each other in the period when the Caravana between visits to carry out advocacy activities. And we're going to be doing this. We're going to be working more closely with our comrades in Colombia, and we will also be organizing technical visits or technical activities so that we can continue to provide technical support to our colleagues in Colombia, guaranteeing the establishment of an ongoing process of support, of technical support and legal support that we can offer to our comrades in Colombia. And we've made advances on this in the year since the last visit, but we're going to make sure that it works even better in the future. Also, we will respond to specific requests that are made, that we receive, and that will themselves be useful in the preparation of the next visit, because this will be ongoing work that we have developed with our comrades in Colombia. And then finally, looking at the dates of the next visit. We think that it's going to be between the 20th and the 31st of August 2024. That's the idea of the next visit. And so we encourage members of the international community from now onwards to continue with their actions of activities, solidarity actions with human rights in Colombia and lawyers who work in the field of human rights, that you remain committed, please, to human rights in Colombia. And that's it. Next visit in August of 2024, and continue with your actions of solidarity in the meantime. Thank you. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much, Aguida. It would be nice if the panel members could open their screens, please, could turn their cameras on so that we can thank them for the time that they have offered and for their commitment and the commitment that they have demonstrated to the defense of human rights, as Aguida has said. Now, at this moment, as member of the Colombian Caravana and as members of the international Caravana, we commit ourselves to continue to accompany, to support you in your work as leaders, and we will continue to support you in as much as we can as you desire. For now, I've got nothing more to do really, but to thank you for the time that you have dedicated to this event. I don't know if Sara or Reynaldo from Cajar and from the Caravana would like to say some words of closure. I don't know if Reynaldo or Sara, you would like to say something? Carmen, thank you.
Desde mi corazón.
From my heart, really, I want to express my profound thanks to everybody who has participated, especially our colleagues in Colombia. We are inspired by the struggle that you are involved in and that we share with you. This struggle in solidarity and in support. Many thanks for everything that you do. And now, just know that we are fully committed to the commitment that we have expressed this evening. From us, thank you. We're with you for always, forever. Thank you, Sara, for your words. Reynaldo? Just that all of our gratitude to the Caravana and Sara. Sara is the historical representation of the Caravana, so I'd like to say thank you to her as the historical representative of the Caravana. Thank you to all of you. Thank you. Good afternoon, good night, good midday, whatever the time is, and a great embrace, hug for you all, even though it's a virtual hug, and for those of you who haven't already, we will post the reports and also the recordings of today's event.
Hola, hola.
General shouting of solidarity and international solidarity. A hug from Spain.